Thunder split the sky like a blade through silk. Rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca Caruso's private study on the 14th floor of his Las Vegas mansion, each droplet striking the glass with the rhythm of a heartbeat. 11:47 in the evening. Summer heat still radiated from the marble floors even as the storm tried to cool the city below. Luca Caruso sat motionless in his leather chair, a man of 42 years with the kind of face that had seen things most people could not survive knowing. Dark eyes. A scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a map of violence. His white silk shirt, unbuttoned at the collar to show the weight of gold chains beneath, now bore something darker spreading across the fabric like spilled wine. Blood. A knife wound. Deep. Serrated blade, which meant whoever held it wanted him to bleed slow. Sergio and Theo stood frozen on either side of him, their hands already moving toward the concealed weapons beneath their tailored suit jackets. Both men wore black like funeral attendants. Both had killed people. Neither had expected to see their boss bleeding. The door to the study swung open. Aria Sinclair stood in the doorway, gasping. 27 years old, but the kind of tired that aged a woman beyond mathematics. Her dark hair hung wet against her pale face, plastered there by rain from the service entrance 3 floors below. She wore the uniform of the mansion's housekeeping staff, black dress, white apron, white linen napkins folded over her forearm. The rain had soaked through the fabric until it clung to her frame like a second skin. Her eyes were wide. Not with the kind of shock that froze people. The other kind. The kind that moved them. She should have run. She should have screamed and backed away and reported the security breach to someone in the hierarchy above her. She was nobody. A maid earning $13 an hour, invisible to everyone in this mansion except when they needed their coffee refilled or their sheets changed. She had no business being in this room. She had no business seeing any of this. Instead, Aria walked forward. "Don't," Sergio said, his voice like gravel under boots. His hand wrapped around the shape beneath his jacket. "Step back." She didn't step back. She moved toward Luca's chair with the kind of focus that turned her invisible body into something purposeful. Her hands were shaking. The napkins folded over her arm, ordinary napkins meant to dry glasses, came loose and spilled into her palms. Without hesitation, without asking permission, without speaking a single word, she pressed those napkins against the wound in his side. The pressure was firm. She understood something about bleeding, about wounds, about the mathematics of survival. "Put pressure here," she said, and her voice was steady. Strange how terror could strip away all pretense and leave only the necessary things. "Don't move." Luca's dark eyes locked onto hers. In that moment, something calculated shifted behind his gaze. Not gratitude. Not yet. Something closer to recognition, the awareness that this invisible woman had chosen to move toward danger instead of away from it. That choice changed the weight of the room. "Get her out," Sergio said. "No." Luca's voice came out rough, thick with pain. "Let her stay." The thunder cracked again, so close the windows trembled. The storm was directly overhead now, making war against the glass. The air in the room smelled of copper and expensive cigars and the metallic scent of rain blown in from the open door behind her. But what she did not know was that this single act of mercy, this decision to press her hands against a stranger's wound and ask for nothing in return, had already begun to change the calculation of everything he thought he was. The loyalty of men could be bought. The terror of enemies could be manufactured. But mercy, real mercy, given when escape was possible, that could not be manufactured. That kind of choice was rarer than diamonds. Luca leaned his head back against the leather chair. "Close the door," he told Theo. "Get Dr. Pashancia. Tell him to use the underground entrance. And send Marco. No one else." Theo moved. Sergio's hand remained on his weapon. "What is your name?" Luca asked the woman beside him. "Aria." The word came out small, like a question. "Aria Sinclair." "Aria." Stay exactly where you are. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what is coming tomorrow. These stories of unexpected mercy, of people finding each other in the darkness, they matter. Share this one. Now let us go back to the beginning. Back to 3 weeks earlier, when Aria Sinclair first walked through the gates of the Caruso mansion, when she was still completely invisible, when she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she could not imagine. 3 weeks earlier, the sun had still been high enough to hurt. Aria sat in her 2003 Honda Civic in the parking lot of the Caruso mansion at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, staring at the employment papers in her lap. The address was printed at the top, 7845 Cathedral Lane, Las Vegas, Nevada. The salary was written in precise black ink, $400 per week. Housekeeping staff. Live-in position available. Benefits after 90 days. $400 per week. The math in her head was the same math she had done every morning for the past 8 months. Rent was $1,800 a month. Emma's school supplies were $140 this year. The foreclosure notice on her apartment was dated 72 hours ago. She had $78 in her bank account. $17 in cash in her wallet, which she was saving for gas because if the car ran out of fuel, everything collapsed. Her mother's prayer card was tucked in that same wallet, worn so thin the edges were almost translucent. She had carried it for 4 years, ever since the funeral. Sometimes she pressed it between her palms and whispered words she didn't believe God still listened to. $400 per week meant she could make the mortgage payment. It meant Emma wouldn't have to move schools again. It meant the state would have no legal reason to investigate her fitness as a mother. The threat of losing custody was always there, humming beneath every decision like a low-frequency hum only she could hear. Aria opened the car door and stepped into the Nevada heat. The mansion rose in front of her like something from a dream that could turn into a nightmare without warning. Pale stone. Windows that reflected the sky back at anyone foolish enough to look. 3 stories of money and power arranged in a perfect rectangle around a courtyard she could see through the gates. 2 black SUVs sat parked near the entrance, their windows dark, their presence a physical weight on the air. A man in a black suit approached the gates. Name: Aria Sinclair. I'm here for the housekeeping interview. He spoke into a radio attached to his collar. Waited. Nodded at something she couldn't hear. The gate swung open with a whisper of hydraulic machinery. Through the courtyard. Door marked service. 3rd floor. Ask for Marco. Aria walked through gates that closed behind her with a click like a lock turning. The courtyard was cooler, shaded by columns that rose up and up until they disappeared into shadow. The stone beneath her feet was the color of old bones. Everything about this place felt like something that could swallow a person whole. The service door was exactly where the man said it would be. Inside, the air conditioning was cold enough to raise goosebumps on her arms. The hallway was painted institutional beige, lit by fluorescent panels that made everything look like it was already dead. She climbed stairs that smelled like bleach and industrial cleaner. The 3rd floor hallway branched in 3 directions, each corridor identical to the last. A man was waiting. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with shoulders that filled the hallway. His hair was dark and closely cropped. His suit was charcoal gray, expensive in a way that screamed money without announcing it. His name tag read Marco, and when he smiled, his eyes didn't participate. Aria Sinclair. Yes. Mr. Caruso wants to meet you before you start. Something cold moved through her chest. She hadn't expected that. The interview form had said housekeeping manager, not the owner himself. I'm not sure I understand. Marco was already walking. Come with me. The elevator they took was silent, the kind of private elevator that only people with specific access codes could enter. Marco inserted a card, pressed a button labeled PH, and the numbers climbed. 14. 15. 16. When the doors opened, they opened onto the private study. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, the city of Las Vegas spread out below like a circuit board of lights. Expensive furniture arranged in perfect symmetry. A mahogany desk that must have cost more than her car. And behind that desk, a man. He was standing, which gave her the first real look at him. Tall. Broad-shouldered in the way that came from deliberate training, not from genetics alone. His suit was black, custom-tailored, open at the collar. Dark hair, silvered slightly at the temples. The scar on his face was unmistakable, a thin line running from his left eye to his cheekbone, the kind of scar that came from something sharp and intentional. His eyes were the color of storm clouds just before they break. "You can leave us, Marco," Luca Caruso said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, the kind of voice that made people listen whether they wanted to or not. Marco withdrew. The door closed with a soft click. Aria stood alone in the room with the most dangerous man in Nevada, and she had absolutely no idea why. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. She sat. The leather was soft, expensive, the kind of furniture that had been chosen by someone who understood comfort as a weapon. "Tell me about Emma," he said. The room went absolutely still. No one was supposed to know about Emma. Emma was private. Emma was the reason she had applied for this job, the reason she had driven through the heat at 2 in the afternoon, the reason she carried a prayer card worn thin by her mother's fingers and her own. "How did you?" "Background check. Standard procedure. Your daughter is 7 years old. She attends Desert Rose Elementary. Her teacher reports that she is quiet, intelligent, and sometimes hungry." He paused. "You walk her to school every morning before your shift at the diner, then you work a double shift, then you pick her up at 6 in the evening. You have done this for 3 years without missing a single day." Aria's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. "That kind of consistency," Luca continued, "is rare. That kind of love is even rarer. If this is about the foreclosure, it is not about your debt. It is about your choice to carry it alone." He moved around the desk and leaned against the front, his position now closer to her, though still maintaining distance. "You could ask for help. There are government programs. Religious organizations. Instead, you work yourself into exhaustion rather than admit you need assistance." Aria said nothing. "You will have this job," he said. $400 per week, as stated. 90 days until benefits. But the actual salary is $500 weekly, effective immediately. The additional money is because you are clearly overqualified for the position and because your child deserves better than the apartment building where you currently live. The words didn't make sense in sequence. "I don't understand," she said. "You will live here, in the staff housing on the property. Private room. Kitchen privileges. Your daughter can stay with you on weekends, or we can arrange." "Why are you doing this?" Luca moved back to his chair and sat. "Because I have seen what desperation does to people. What it makes them willing to accept. And because someone very long ago showed me kindness when they had no obligation to do so. That kindness became the only thing I could remember about mercy." He opened a drawer in his desk and removed a folder. "You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Marco will show you to your room. Pack only what you need. Everything else you require will be provided." Aria took the folder with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her name was printed on the employment contract. The salary was written in black ink. $500 per week. Housing included. Medical benefits after 60 days. "There is one rule," Luca said as she stood to leave. "You are invisible to everyone in this house except when they require your services. You ask no questions. You keep no secrets. You repeat nothing you see or hear. You understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good. Welcome to the Caruso house, Aria Sinclair." She turned to leave. "And Aria?" His voice stopped her at the door. "Your daughter will be safe here. That is not a promise. That is a guarantee. She walked out of that office without understanding that she had just walked into the beginning of everything. 3 weeks later, thunder would split the sky, and mercy would make its demand known. The marble corridor stretched before her like a tunnel of light, and Aria Sinclair moved through it like a ghost, her black and white uniform the only color that seemed permitted in this world of cream and gold and endless mirrors. It was 6 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, and she had been awake since 4, had stood in the shower for exactly 3 minutes to save on water, had dressed Emma in yesterday's clothes because tomorrow was laundry day and the laundromat cost money she did not have. The Caruso mansion rose around her in impossible silence, 16,000 square feet of imported marble, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Las Vegas Valley, crystal chandeliers that threw rainbow light across walls worth more than most people's entire lives. Her footsteps made no sound. The floor was polished so thoroughly she could see her own reflection looking back at her, and for a moment she did not recognize the exhausted woman staring up from the ground. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks since Luca Caruso had hired her without an interview, had simply listened while she talked about Emma and the apartment and the number that kept growing larger every single day, and then had handed her a folder and said she would start immediately. She had asked no questions. The other staff members moved around her like water around a stone, and she had learned quickly not to expect acknowledgement. There was Marcus, the head chef, who had not once looked directly at her face. There was Sophia, the head housekeeper, who moved through the corridors with the exhausted efficiency of someone who had long ago learned that servants exist in the margins. The guards posted at various points throughout the mansion did not so much as twitch in her direction. She was invisible, and invisibility was a gift. She had learned that on her first day, when she was dusting Luca's study while he conducted business on the telephone, speaking in rapid Italian about shipments and territories and men whose names meant nothing to her. He sat behind his desk in a suit that probably cost more than she would earn in an entire year, and he did not once acknowledge her presence. She moved around the room like a phantom, her cloth trailing across already spotless surfaces, and when he glanced briefly in her direction it was the look a man might give to a chair or a lamp, something that existed, but something that did not require his consciousness. That invisibility carried her through the first week. Through her Tuesday and Friday shifts, through the hours spent cleaning rooms she would never sleep in, through the careful navigation of hallways where dangerous-looking men in black suits conducted conversations in low voices about matters she could not and would not allow herself to understand. She kept her head down. She asked nothing. She remembered the single rule he had given her: you keep no secrets. You repeat nothing you see or hear. But on Thursdays and Sundays, she returned to the small apartment 3 miles away, and there the invisibility shattered completely. The apartment building was the color of old concrete, the kind of place where the windows did not quite close and the neighbors' arguments filtered through the walls like a constant low-frequency hum. It was a single bedroom on the 2nd floor, the furniture salvaged from various donations, the kitchen barely large enough for one person to stand at a time. Emma slept on a mattress on the floor because there was no money for a bed frame, and her 6-year-old daughter had stopped asking why theirs looked different from the pictures in school. Aria counted money by lamplight every Sunday evening. She sat on the torn couch with the bills and coins arranged in careful piles on the coffee table, and she moved them back and forth like she was performing some kind of mathematics that might produce a different answer if only she arranged them correctly. $78. That was all. $78 in crumpled bills and loose change, the accumulation of tips from the restaurant shifts that were slowly vanishing from her schedule. Every week the number was smaller than before. The foreclosure notice sat on the kitchen counter where she had placed it 3 days ago, unable to throw it away, unable to read it again. $22,000 due in 30 days or the apartment would be seized. Emma would go to the state. The custody would become something she no longer possessed. She had run the number 17 times. There was no version of mathematics where this resolved itself. The second job had seemed like a solution when Douglas Hale had offered it. She had been working evening shifts at the restaurant for 8 months, and he had approached her during the lunch hour when the kitchen was empty except for the 2 of them. Douglas was in his mid-40s, with thinning hair slicked back against his skull and a gold watch that caught the light whenever he moved his wrists. He was the restaurant manager, which meant he controlled the schedule, which meant he controlled which servers got the Friday and Saturday nights when customers tipped generously and the bills actually felt manageable. When he had approached her with the offer of more hours, she had felt something like hope. The feeling had lasted exactly 4 days. It was a Tuesday evening, and she was restocking supplies in the narrow storage closet when he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The space was small, barely large enough for 2 people, and his body blocked the only exit. She could smell his cologne and underneath it something sharper, whiskey from his afternoon drinking, something she had learned to recognize because it made his eyes glassier and his smile more dangerous. "You want those Friday night shifts?" His voice was low, almost intimate. "The ones that actually pay." She stepped backward, her shoulders pressing against the metal shelving. "I work hard, Douglas. I show up on time." I know you do." He moved closer. His hand reached out and brushed her arm, just barely, the touch of a man testing boundaries. "You're a good worker, Aria. Reliable. That's attractive to me. Attractive things deserve rewards." She did not move. She had learned very early in her life that stillness sometimes prevented violence better than resistance. "You need to be nicer to me," he continued, his breath washing over her face. "And I can make sure you get those premium shifts. How many hours a week do you need? 20? 30? I can do that. I can do a lot of things for people who cooperate." The word hung in the air between them like a blade. She pushed past him, her shoulder connecting hard with his chest, and he made a surprised noise but did not grab her. She left the closet and did not look back, and when he called out behind her, "Think about it, Aria." Those Friday nights could change everything. She kept walking. But something had shifted. The Friday shifts did not materialize. Instead, her schedule contracted. 12-hour weeks became 8-hour weeks. Her shifts were moved to Tuesday and Wednesday evenings when the restaurant was half empty and tips were measured in 1s and occasional 5s. And one week, she discovered that the tip jar, the communal jar where servers pooled their gratuities, had been short $17. It happened again the following week. She tried to report it to the owner, a man named Vincent who spent most of his time in the back office. When she explained what was happening, described how the money was disappearing, his response came with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Prove it," he said. "Or maybe you should just be grateful you have a job at all, Aria. Jobs are not easy to find. You do know that, don't you?" The message was clear. She could accept the theft or she could lose the position entirely. She accepted it. The worn prayer card stayed in her pocket at all times. It was old, the edges soft from decades of handling, the image of St. Michael faded to almost nothing. It had belonged to her grandmother, and then to her mother, and the last time her mother had held it, she was in a hospital bed with pneumonia in both lungs and the knowledge that she would not survive the week. Aria had been 17 years old, and she had sat holding her mother's hand, and her mother had pressed the card into her palm and said, "For when you need protection, baby girl. For when everything else fails." She had carried it every day since. She would hold it sometimes at night when Emma was sleeping, would run her thumb over the faded edges, would whisper to a god she was no longer sure was listening. The summer heat pressed down on Las Vegas with the weight of something deliberate and crushing. The apartment became an oven, and the air conditioning unit that came with the rental had stopped working 3 weeks prior. She could not afford to have it fixed. She could not afford many things. The heat made Emma cranky, made her cry at night because her thin mattress held the warmth like a fever, and Aria would sit beside her in the darkness and sing songs her own mother had sung to her. On the night before she returned to the Caruso mansion for her regular Tuesday shift, she counted the money again. $78. The foreclosure notice was now 2 weeks old. The deadline was approaching like a storm moving across the desert, and Aria could see it coming but had no shelter to run toward. The sky outside her apartment window darkened as evening fell. Clouds gathered on the horizon, rolling in from the west, and the air became thick and still. A storm was building. She could feel it in the pressure against her skin, in the way the birds had stopped singing, in the quality of silence that preceded something violent. She did not know that someone had started watching her. The black SUV had been parked 3 blocks away for the past week, its windows tinted dark, its engine running periodically to maintain the surveillance equipment inside. Sergio sat in the driver's seat with a tablet in his hands, watching the apartment building on the small screen. He had been assigned this task by Luca Caruso exactly 7 days ago, given a single instruction: follow her. Learn her world. Report what you find. Sergio was 34 years old and had worked for the Caruso family for 12 years, and in all that time he had never questioned an order. He followed Aria from the mansion to the apartment, watched her move through the building like a woman carrying an invisible weight, observed the way she moved with Emma through the small space. He filed photographs and reports and sent them electronically to Luca without commentary or interpretation. He did not need to. The photographs were enough. A foreclosure notice photographed through the apartment window. Aria sitting on the couch with her head in her hands at 2 in the morning. Emma sleeping on a mattress on the floor while her mother sat guard in a chair, unable to sleep, unable to rest. The small amount of food in the refrigerator. The shoes with holes in the sole that Aria wore to both jobs. The way she counted bills at the end of each day like she was trying to perform miracles through mathematics. Luca Caruso studied these photographs in his office late at night, and something in his expression shifted each time he looked at them. He did not yet know what it meant. But he would. Very soon, he would understand. The rain hammered against the study windows in thick, relentless sheets. Thunder cracked across the Las Vegas sky like a gunshot in the silence, and the light from the single lamp cast long shadows across mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books no one read. Luca Caruso sat behind his desk, dressed in an open white shirt that revealed the gold chain at his neck, his dark eyes fixed on the man standing across from him. His younger brother Marco. 42 years old, with the same sharp jaw and the same dangerous eyes, but where Luca had learned control, Marco had learned only hunger. The Antonelli family offered me twice what you pay, Marco said, his voice calm, which made the words more terrible. They want this territory and they are willing to eliminate anyone who stands in the way. Even you, brother. Luca did not move. Then you have chosen. Marco's hand went to his jacket pocket and withdrew a blade, 7 inches of polished steel that caught the lamplight. He lunged across the desk in one fluid motion, and Luca rolled backward, the knife missing him by inches and embedding itself in the leather chair behind him. They collided against the bookshelf. Marco was younger but Luca was faster, and he was faster because 15 years of ruling an empire meant you learned to anticipate betrayal before it announced itself. The blade came again. Luca caught Marco's wrist and twisted, but Marco drove his free elbow upward and connected with Luca's ribs. Pain exploded through his side. He grunted, released Marco's wrist, and felt the blade punch deep into his side, tearing through muscle and skin in a flash of white heat. Blood bloomed across his white shirt like a flower opening. Marco pulled the knife free. For one moment the brothers stared at each other, not as family but as enemies. Then Marco ran toward the balcony doors and hurled himself into the rain, his footsteps thundering across the tile before disappearing into the storm. Luca pressed his hand against the wound. Blood ran between his fingers. His breath came in short, controlled bursts. He did not call for help. Instead, he sat down in the damaged chair and waited. The door opened 30 seconds later. Aria Sinclair stood in the doorway, a dust cloth still in her hand, her eyes wide. She had been cleaning the 3rd floor. She had heard the crash and the voices and the terrible sounds of violence. She should have left. Instead she had come closer. Now she saw the blood. She moved without thinking. 3 quick steps across the marble floor and she was kneeling beside his chair, pressing a cloth against the wound. Put pressure here. Don't move. Luca started, but she cut him off. You need pressure. You need clean supplies. You need to stay still. Her voice was steady. Trembling underneath but steady on the surface, like a candle in the wind that refuses to extinguish. Sergio. Theo. Where are they? Downstairs. She ran to the study door and called down the hallway. 2 sets of footsteps thundered up the stairs, then 2 men burst into the study with weapons drawn. Sergio, 34 years old with cold grey eyes and a scar running from his left temple to his cheekbone, and Theo, younger, maybe 30, with the nervous energy of someone always ready for violence. They stopped when they saw her kneeling beside their boss. "Find Marco," Luca said quietly. "Now." "Sir, we need to," Sergio began. "Now." They exchanged a look that lasted 1 second, maybe 2. Then they ran. The sound of their footsteps echoed down the hallway and down the stairs, and then there was silence except for the rain. Aria worked quickly. She had done this before, years ago, before Emma was born, when her mother was sick and the hospitals had sent her home to die and someone had to learn how to tend wounds and stitch skin and hold steady when everything was falling apart. She brought supplies from the bathroom, clean cloth, water, gauze. She cleaned the wound with gentle pressure. The blade had caught the ribs and done damage, but not fatal damage. "Not yet." "You are not afraid," Luca said. He watched her hands move with precision despite the trembling in her shoulders. "I am terrified," Aria whispered. "But you are bleeding and Sergio and Theo are not here." She found needle and thread in the household supplies and stitched the wound closed, her fingers sure despite the fear running through her veins like electricity. When she finished, Luca caught her wrist gently. "What is your name?" "Aria." "Aria Sinclair. I know what Douglas Hale has been doing to you." She froze. Her face went white, draining of color like someone had pulled a plug and let all her hope drain away. "How could you?" "I followed you. After work. 3 times. His voice was matter-of-fact, describing what he had seen like he was reading a report. "I watched Douglas steal cash from your apron when you were in the kitchen. I watched Catherine Mercer meet him in the parking lot and hand him an envelope. I read the foreclosure notice that is waiting in your apartment. I know you have $78 left to your name. I know you sleep in a chair beside your daughter's mattress so you can hear if she calls out in the night." Aria pulled her hand away. Her eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall, holding them back through pure force of will. "Why would you follow me?" "Because you heard my brother threaten my life and you said nothing. You stayed. You did not run to the police or the newspapers or anyone who would pay for that information. Loyalty like that is rare. In my world, it is rarer than diamonds." "I am nobody," Aria said. Her voice cracked on the word. "Just a maid in your mansion. This is not my world. I cannot be involved in this. I have Emma. She is 6 years old. If anything happens to me, she goes to state custody. I have $78 and a foreclosure notice for $22,000 due in 3 days. 3 days. I lose the apartment, I lose my daughter. I cannot." Her voice broke. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. Luca listened without interrupting. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "Douglas is escalating. Catherine Mercer told me that if I did not convince you to sell the property on Flamingo, she would make sure no one in this city would ever hire me again. She said she would call child services. She said I am not a fit mother because I cannot provide stability. What else did she say? That $5,000 was mine if I helped. That $20,000 more would follow if I succeeded." Aria's hand shook. "I refused. I told her I was nobody and that you did not know I existed. But she laughed and said that was exactly why I was perfect. That I could get close to you, and that a man like you would believe a woman like me if she told him that property was trouble." Luca's expression did not change, but something dangerous stirred in his chest. Something cold and dark and precise. He made a decision in that moment, a decision that would reshape everything that came next. "Go home," he said. "Take tomorrow off. Paid. I cannot accept. It is not a request." She left, clutching the worn prayer card that lived in her apron pocket, a card her mother had given her 17 years ago, before the cancer took her voice and then her life. She held it like a talisman against the darkness. When she was gone, Sergio returned alone. "We lost him in the rain," Sergio said. "But we are tracking him. Boss, in 15 years I have never seen you like this. With a civilian. A woman from outside our world." Luca did not answer immediately. He pressed his hand against his bandaged wound and felt the pain throb in rhythm with his heartbeat. "She saved my life tonight and asked for nothing in return. When was the last time anyone did that?" Sergio had no answer. Luca reached for his phone and made 3 calls. The first was to his accountant. The second was to the police commissioner in his pocket. The third was to a man who specialized in making people disappear, legally or otherwise. By the time the rain stopped falling, the machinery of his power had begun turning. Douglas Hale would be found. Catherine Mercer would be exposed. And the woman who had pressed napkins against his wound and asked nothing would never go hungry again. But Aria Sinclair did not know any of this. She went home to her daughter, held her while she slept, and counted her $78 one more time. She did not know that the most powerful man in Las Vegas had just declared war on everyone who had hurt her, and that by morning, everything would change. The freezer door hung open like the entrance to a tomb, cold air spilling into the kitchen in thick, visible waves. Aria Sinclair stood alone among hanging sides of beef and frozen fish, her breath forming small clouds in the bitter air. She was counting inventory, a task Douglas Hale had assigned her an hour ago, busy work designed to isolate her from the dining room, from witnesses, from anyone who might hear what came next. His footsteps on the tile were deliberate, measured, unhurried. Douglas Hale stepped into the freezer without removing his chef's whites, his face already crimson with a rage that had been building for 2 days, ever since she had stopped flinching. His eyes were small and hard as bullet casings. Behind him, the dinner service continued in muffled chaos, orders being called, plates hitting the pass, the metallic clang of pots. No one could hear this. That was the point. "Who do you think you are?" His voice came out like gravel in a blender, each word an accusation. "Catherine told me about the check. $22,000. A cashier's check deposited into your account by some criminal with an Italian name. You think some gangster is going to protect you in this city?" Aria turned to face him, her jaw set. She had spent 2 days feeling the weight of Luca's gift, the money that had saved her apartment, that had saved Emma from being taken by the state. 2 days of knowing she was no longer invisible. It had changed something in her spine, something in the way she stood. "Stay away from me," she said. The words landed like a slap. Douglas's face went darker, almost purple. He crossed the freezer in 3 strides and shoved her backward into the metal shelving. Her shoulder blade struck hard, and pain radiated down her arm like lightning. Cans of vegetables clattered to the frozen floor. "You cost me a fortune," he hissed, stepping closer. That property development deal was worth millions. Catherine had it arranged perfectly. And then you with your maid's uniform and your pathetic single mother routine, you went behind our backs to some criminal. You think I do not know what this is? You think I do not know you spread your legs for him to get that check? Aria's hand came up faster than thought. She shoved him backward with all the strength in her body, and Douglas stumbled, his shoes sliding on the icy floor. For the first time in 3 years of working at that restaurant, she watched him lose his balance. "Do not ever touch me again," she said, her voice steady as stone. Something dangerous flickered across Douglas's face. He lunged forward, and his hand closed around her throat like a vice. Her breath cut off. The freezer tilted. She saw his fist rising, saw the terrible intention in his eyes, saw the bone-crushing impact he was about to deliver. The freezer door swung open. Sergio and Theo stood in the doorway like statues carved from obsidian. Both wore dark suits despite the kitchen heat. Both had the particular stillness of men who had witnessed death and made peace with it. Sergio's face was completely expressionless. Theo's was worse. He was smiling, a smile that suggested he had been hoping for an excuse to enter this freezer. Douglas's fist froze mid-air. His hand fell away from Aria's throat. "You touched something that belongs to our boss," Sergio said, his voice soft and conversational, the way someone might comment on weather. "That was a mistake." Douglas stammered backward. "This is private property. You cannot just, this is assault. I am going to call the police." Theo moved forward, and Douglas moved backward so quickly he nearly fell. They escorted him out of the freezer with the casual efficiency of men removing trash. Aria stood alone in the cold, gasping, her throat burning where his hand had been. Through the closing door, she heard the chaos of the kitchen shift to something else, a shocked, terrible silence. Then the screaming started. Douglas Hale was dragged through the kitchen past 30 frozen staff members. A plate dropped and shattered. Someone's knife clattered to the floor. His shoes scraped and squeaked against the tile as his feet left the ground. He was screaming, a high-pitched animal sound that belonged in a slaughterhouse, not a restaurant. His white chef's coat was already torn. "You cannot do this. I will call the police. Do you know who I am? I am a respectable business owner." Theo's voice cut through the hysteria like a blade. "Call them. Tell them you assaulted a woman under the protection of Luca Caruso. See what happens." The back alley door opened. A black SUV waited with its sliding door already open, engine running, exhaust rising in small plumes into the Las Vegas evening. Douglas was thrown inside. His final scream was cut short as the door slammed shut. The SUV's tires squealed against the asphalt. Within seconds, it had disappeared into traffic, and the city swallowed it whole. Sergio walked back into the kitchen. Every cook, every dishwasher, every prep worker stood frozen in place. Sergio surveyed the room with the calm gaze of a general surveying a battlefield. "Mr. Hale will no longer be working here," he announced. "Anyone who has a problem with this can leave now. Anyone who stays understands that this woman," he pointed to Aria, still standing in the freezer doorway, her hand at her throat, "is under the protection of our organization. Are we clear?" 30 heads nodded in unison. Aria did not remember walking home. She remembered the bus ride. She remembered the way the city light streaked past the window like tears of color. She remembered climbing the stairs to her apartment and finding Luca waiting outside, his cashmere coat draped over his broad shoulders, rain beginning to fall again from the bruised sky. He looked like he had been standing there for hours. "What did you do?" she asked. "What needed to be done," he said. Aria descended the stairs slowly, raindrops beginning to speckle her dark hair. "Douglas is gone. Catherine is arrested. You did this for me." "You saved my life and asked for nothing," Luca replied. "I saved yours. We are even." "We are not even." Aria's voice trembled like a candle in the wind. "I cleaned a wound. You destroyed 2 people. I destroyed 2 people who were hunting you. Who would have kept hunting you until there was nothing left of who you are?" Luca stepped closer, and in the rain-soft light, she could see the scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, pale and ancient. "You showed me mercy when you could have run. That choice changed the calculation of everything." Aria's eyes filled with tears. "I did not ask for this." "You did not have to," Luca said. "You did not have to stay that night. You did not have to press napkins against my wound. You did not have to ask nothing in return. But you did. That makes you extraordinary. That makes you worthy of being protected." The rain fell between them, light and warm and smelling of wet concrete and the strange perfume of the desert at night. "My world is dangerous," Aria whispered. "My world is all I have," Luca replied. "Until now." He extended an envelope. "Contract. Household manager position at my residence. Salary of $5,000 per month. Benefits. Security for you and Emma. A room upstairs for her, decorated however she wants. No obligations. Just safety." Aria stared at the envelope. Her hands were shaking. "I cannot." You can, Luca said. You saved me on the worst night of my life. I am saving you on yours. We are bound now. By choice. By the knowledge that we both chose mercy when we could have chosen safety. Aria looked up at him, and in that moment something broke open in her chest, a dam of hope that had been holding back for so long she had forgotten what hope felt like. It was terrifying. It was real. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever allowed herself to feel. What happens now? She asked. Luca smiled, and for the first time in 15 years, his men would later say, they saw something gentle in his expression. Now we begin. 6 months had passed since the night the rain fell like mercy. The mansion was quiet at 7 in the evening, that particular kind of quiet that comes before dinner service, when the kitchen hummed with preparation and the staff moved through the halls like practiced dancers. Aria Sinclair stood in the household manager's office on the second floor, reviewing inventory sheets and staff schedules, her black and white uniform replaced by tailored charcoal slacks and a cream-colored blouse that fit her properly for the first time in her life. The office had a window overlooking the garden where guards patrolled in measured intervals. She could see the gate from here, the desert stretching beyond it like a promise kept. She was no longer drowning. The realization still startled her sometimes, arriving like a surprise she had not earned. She set down the clipboard and pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching the guards nod to each other in the golden evening light. 6 months ago, she had been counting dollars with trembling hands. Now she managed a household budget of $40,000 monthly. The number felt abstract, unreal, like something belonging to another person's life. Downstairs, in the private dining room, Luca sat at the head of a table set for 3. Fresh flowers in a crystal vase. Real silverware. A salad course waiting on porcelain plates. He wore a charcoal suit with an open white shirt, the scar visible along his cheekbone in the amber light from the chandelier. Sergio stood by the wall, motionless as a statue, watching the doorway where Emma would appear. Emma was 7 now. The private school had uniforms and armed guards at the gates. She learned mathematics from tutors who cost more than Aria had earned in a month of double shifts. She had a room on the 3rd floor painted her favorite color, cornflower blue, with shelves full of books and a music box that played a lullaby when you opened it. She called Luca Mr. Caruso with the careful politeness of a child who is still learning trust. The footsteps on the stairs were deliberate and small. Emma descended in her school uniform, her dark hair in a neat braid that Aria had plaited that morning. Behind her came Aria, moving with a confidence that seemed to light the hallway like a candle finally allowed to burn openly. "Good evening," Emma said, taking her seat at Luca's right. She had learned the phrases from Aria. Politeness was a form of armor. "Good evening, Emma," Luca replied, his voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. "How was mathematics today?" "I learned about fractions." "I do not like fractions yet, but Mr. Peterson says I will understand them next week." Emma cut her salad with the careful precision of someone who understands that fine things require delicate handling. "Do you understand fractions, Mr. Caruso?" Luca smiled, and Sergio's breath caught. In 15 years of working for Luca Caruso, he had learned to recognize the subtle shifts in his boss's face. This smile was different. It was genuine. It was unburdened by calculation. "I understand them well enough," Luca said. "Though I have not thought about mathematics in many years. I have been thinking about other things." Aria took her seat across from them, and Luca's eyes found hers for just a moment long enough for Sergio to understand that something had fundamentally altered in the architecture of this empire. The most dangerous man in Las Vegas was looking at a woman who had once counted $78 in a cramped apartment as if she were the only thing in the room that made sense. "This pasta is excellent," Aria said to break the silence. The kitchen staff had prepared it that afternoon, fresh pappardelle with wild mushrooms and sage. The kind of meal that required time and intention. "Chef Marco learned it from his grandmother in Naples," Luca said. "She made it for his father on the night he proposed to his mother. I told Chef Marco to make it tonight because I wanted to show Emma something." Emma looked up from her plate. "What did you want to show me?" That beautiful things are created by people who care about making them beautiful. Your mother cares about many things, but especially about you. That is visible in every choice she makes. Aria's fork paused midway to her mouth. She did not speak, but her eyes glistened like wet glass catching light. Emma returned to her pasta with the unself-consciousness of a child who accepts love as naturally as she accepts air. I have something to show you too. I am learning to play chess. Theo says it is a game of patience and strategy. He has been teaching me the moves. Theo teaches well, Luca said. He learned from me, and I learned from my father before the world taught me to forget the gentler things. The clock on the wall marked 7:30. Outside, the guards continued their patrol. In the kitchen, Chef Marco wiped his hands on a towel and allowed himself a small smile. In the hallway, Sergio stood with his hands folded, understanding that he was witnessing a resurrection of the man he had worked for all these years. The man who had been born from darkness but had not forgotten light. After dinner, Emma climbed the stairs to her room where homework waited. Luca and Aria stood on the terrace overlooking the garden, and the night air was warm and heavy with the scent of roses. Above them, stars pierced the desert sky like promises made and kept. You are different now, Luca said, not as a question but as an observation. I am not drowning anymore, Aria replied. I can breathe. Every morning I wake and I think about that night when I had $78 and 3 days until I lost everything. I think about how close I came to letting go. She turned to face him. I think about how you could have looked away. I could have, Luca agreed. I could have paid someone else to find you and help you. I could have sent money and remained distant. I could have protected myself from the knowledge of your suffering. Instead I followed you into the rain and saw the truth of what had been done to you, and something in me broke open. The wind moved through the garden, rustling the leaves with a sound like rainfall. In the distance, traffic hummed along Las Vegas Boulevard, the city's endless appetite for distraction and forgetting playing out in neon and engine noise. Your brother, Aria said quietly. Marco. Do you regret it? Luca was silent for a long moment. I regret that he made me choose. But I do not regret the choice. He sold family. He sold honor. You saved both. He is serving 25 years in federal prison for racketeering and fraud. The authorities found evidence of his involvement in the theft within 3 hours of my anonymous tip. He will not see daylight again until he is an old man, if he sees it at all. And Catherine Mercer? Her trial concluded last month. Every news outlet in the country covered it. Fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. 32 counts. She is serving 15 years and has lost everything. Her empire dissolved in a single night. Her lawyers could not save her because the evidence was overwhelming and public. She became what she had always been underneath, a woman who preyed on the vulnerable because she mistook cruelty for strength. Aria exhaled, and it sounded like relief. Douglas Hale. Missing persons database. No one looks very hard. He disappeared from the restaurant one evening and did not return. The police filed a report because that is what they do. But everyone understood. There are some people whose absence is a gift to the world. Aria had not asked what happened to him. She had learned not to ask questions about the things that took place in the dark corners of Luca's world. But she understood that mercy had been delivered in its own way, that justice had been served not with a bullet but with the systematic erasure of a man from everything he had built. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, living in the spaces between fear and expectation, never safe, never welcome, never home. Do you ever regret helping me? Aria asked. Luca turned to face her, and in the starlight his scar seemed to glow like something alive. Every power in my world told me to remain untouchable. Every lesson I learned taught me that mercy is weakness. But then you stayed when you could have run. You pressed napkins to my wound and asked nothing in return. You reminded me that the strongest thing a person can do is choose compassion when every instinct screams safety. He extended his hand. I was dying before you found me, Aria. Not just from the wound in my side, from becoming a man who trusted no one and loved nothing. You saved me from that kind of death. She took his hand, and the contact was electric and gentle at once. Emma asked me yesterday if you were going to stay, Aria said. She said everyone else leaves. She did not want you to leave. I am not leaving, Luca replied. Below them, in the garden, a sprinkler came to life, sending water arcing across the grass. It caught the starlight and turned it into something visible, something tangible, something real. The next morning, Aria visited her old apartment building for the first time since leaving. The door to her former unit stood open, a young family moving in with children and furniture and the bright noise of people beginning a new chapter. She climbed the stairs slowly, remembering the weight she had carried on every step, the exhaustion that had lived in her bones. She placed the worn prayer card on the threshold of her old apartment. Someone had written on the back in careful handwriting, "For miracles." She had carried it through the darkest months of her life, touching it when hope felt like a luxury she could not afford. Now another person would find it, and perhaps in that moment when they most needed to believe that impossible things could happen, they would remember that someone else had stood in that darkness and survived. That evening, Luca received Sergio in his study. Rain drummed softly against the windows, not the violent storm of 6 months ago, but a gentle rain that smelled of renewal. The Antonelli family is requesting a meeting, Sergio said. They want to negotiate peace. Your silence these past months has made them nervous. Tell them I will consider it, Luca replied, his eyes fixed on the window where he could see the garden below. In the distance, under the soft patter of rain, Aria played with Emma, both of them laughing as water fell around them. Emma tried to catch droplets in her small hands, and Aria pointed at something in the clouds. Their voices carried up to the study, bright and unguarded and alive. Sergio watched his boss watch the woman below, and something shifted in his understanding of power. She changed everything, he said quietly. She showed me that mercy is not weakness, Luca replied. That choosing to help someone is the most powerful thing we can do. I was becoming stone. She reminded me that stone breaks, but living things bend and survive. He turned from the window. We will meet with the Antonelli family. But tell them that certain priorities have changed. I am no longer interested in expansion. I am interested in consolidation. In protecting what matters. Aria looked up at that moment and caught sight of Luca framed in the study window. Their eyes met across the distance, and she smiled, a smile that belonged to no one else, that carried inside it the memory of $78 and 3 days and a choice made in the darkness. The smile of a woman who had learned that sometimes miracles come from the places we least expect them. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes the most powerful people in the world are the ones who choose kindness when they could choose cruelty. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that mercy is strength, that helping others is never wasted. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story of justice delivered to those who thought they were untouchable. Hit that notification bell. We will see you in the next one.